Folks, we are live. Welcome to Talking Crit. I am Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. I got the directions right this time. Uh, Stage right, my whatever, is the one and only Mike Battalato, Bad Mike, North Texas RPG Con, my once a week work spouse. And with the weight of the show on his shoulders, as is every week, is the one and only Jim Kitchen. This is your panel. Welcome.
Jim, I you look good, and I say that in any way you
Platonic
want
way?
to take any way you want to take it. How is the knee feeling? We have not asked you about
Oh,
that
it's
at all.
pretty awful. I actually,
Oh,
I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow.
whether you're
I
taking really good
we're
drugs, or you're hiding it. I don't
we're
know.
trying to avoid the peg leg, but I'm not sure we're going to avoid the peg leg. So we'll see how it goes. More importantly, I had a cardiac appointment this morning, and that was a lot of fun as well. So shenanigans.
Ooh.
So I guess there's nothing like a week of reminders that, by the way, the warranty ran out a long time ago, and so shenanigans. So we'll see how it goes. But
Old,
I don't know.
old man health.
I think what I would tell anybody who is contemplating knee replacement surgery, you should do it sooner than later. Don't wait. But at the same time, you should expect a long recovery cycle, and don't kid yourself, right? The other thing I would say that goes along with that is diet and exercise. Diet and exercise. Like, I would say that I'm very lucky in that my cholesterol is not like you need to lay down, sir. However, when we talk about gaming and gamers and health, and Eric has a weekly talk about this, trying to make this point over and over and over again. Um, it's not my job to police what you eat. It's not my job to police what you drink. It's not my job to scold you or whatnot. I will simply say that there are consequences to habits, and that is alcohol, smoking, lack of exercise, terrible diet, whatever you want to call it. And I don't want to dwell on this, but I would say to people, dear Lord, you should visit a doctor. You should get some things done. You should get some things checked. If you're over 50, don't take any of this lightly. I think one of the things that we always talk about as men is we talk about prostate cancer. Get checked. I mean, really and truly, just get checked.
Mhm.
I I will segue into last week. I mentioned I have had a best friend since fifth grade named Keith, and played D&D with Keith. He was the guy who got Gamma World before I did. Um, he was married for almost 33 years. His wife passed on Sunday. Um, she had fallen ill, and and it was it. It was over. I was the best man at their wedding, and I helped work on her obituary yesterday. And and again, you have this week of reminders that we're all getting older, and so on and so forth. I said earlier this week to somebody, treasure the ones you love, treasure your friendships, don't take any of this for granted. And I just she had fought a lot of serious illnesses over the last 25 years. And when he and I were talking, one of the things that I said was that she really pushed the dice rolls, and she kept coming up great until she didn't. And and when she went into the ER, my friend Keith was very much grounded, and knew there was a very good chance his wife would not be coming back out, which is why the decision to put her into hospice care was fairly easy. Um, I I think I think that we all get older, and we all, I've never been a quantity of friends. I'd rather have a quality of friends. And it's it's pretty hard when you lose somebody like that, like they have two adult daughters, and they have a couple of grandkids, and that's fantastic. But when I was knocking out her obituary yesterday, one of the things that I pointed out is, like, she's a true woman from Kentucky, right? She had country and craft lore and sewing ability, down, but she also self-taught herself engineering with CAD, and that's how she spent most of her career, is working in engineering. And she had a real eye for detail and so on. She had a real sharp sense of humor. She was well read, and all of my friend circle back home is very we're all just sort of grieving, right? We're passing messages back and forth. And it's not that we didn't know that this was coming, right? She'd had serious illnesses, but it's one of those things where, my world is just a little bit more diminished. And it's another reminder that I'm late 50s, coming up on 60s in another year or two. And I have thought a lot this week. I don't know if I talked about it on the show, but Friday was the 8th anniversary of my dad's terminal diagnosis. And so there are certainly times where, I lost my father. He passed away at 69. And I think to myself, do I just have a decade left? Like, do I have to get rid of all this shit in the next 10 years? Because I don't want anybody else to have to deal with all this stuff. Which harkens back to things that we say all the time. But I think Keith watches this show every once in a while, and Keith knows, like, he's my brother from another mother. I used to hang out at his house to the point that, his mom jokingly would refer to me as the son she never wanted, which I always enjoyed. I always liked that. But it is what it is. But yeah, go see your doctor, go get some exercise. Don't drink the 2-liter of Mountain Dew in a sitting just because you can. Your liver would beg you to stop. Just, take a breath. So that's enough for me. What you got, Mike?
Cheetos and Diet Coke, but that's still bad for you.
That's right. You're still less sugar.
Yeah. Oh, well, whatever. We'll do what we
less
can.
Bad.
Yeah. We, as you may have noticed, we don't have a special guest this week. Next week we will have Tom Wilson of ShireCon fame and also self-publishing fame, and we always have a lot to talk about when Tom's on the show. So it's going to be fun to have him talk about ShireCon, what changes are in store for that, and also what he's publishing, because for those of you who don't know, he is one of the hardest working men in gaming, and he's probably published 16 things this year that I don't even know 8 of them. So we'll talk to him too. But I was it's just going to be us, so I thought, well, let's talk about what has been popular this week. And I started flipping through stuff, and I saw 2 things that caught my attention. One was expected, one was unexpected. The expected one was obviously Dark Sun. The reaction spread across Facebook to some of the quotes we saw. And as Jim said, take everything you hear now with a grain of salt, because we don't really know what's happening. We just have a few quotes to base it on. But obviously, being the internet, that's what everybody's going to base everything on. So we had an end world thread today about Dark Sun, and we're going to guess how long, because my joke has always been every end world thread ends in this has gone too far. We're cutting the thread off. It's gone. It's done. So Eric, how many pages did that thread last today?
I didn't know. I didn't look at it, but I'm going to
guess. But the question begs, before we get into our guesses, the question begs, right? Number one, it's in world. So there had to be a lot of people arguing that WotC was right to leave out slavery and cannibalism and bone weapons or thrycreen or whatever it is that people at N-World would
cannibal
want.
halflings, probably.
I don't see N-World as being a hotbed of grognards on the barricade saying, "Where is my slavery? I need my slavery. Yeah. I am incomplete without my slavery."
Okay, so I'm going to give you some hints here. You'd be a little surprised. I found it was probably unscientifically 70-30 people going, why the F are they making a mature setting and not putting mature themes in it like slavery? We have safeguards, we have X cards, we have session zeros. If it bothers somebody, we can just take it out. I was actually pretty surprised, Jim, because normally you're correct. Emerald does not have that kind of nuance. It's usually fly through the rafters. Oh my God, this isn't worth it. So how many pages, Eric, do you think it was?
I'm gonna say now how many pages? How many comments per page, Mike? That's the question.
Oh no! Just give him a page.
There's only 68. There's only 68 comments a page. There's not a lot of comments per page.
I'm gonna say it went on for 3 pages.
Okay, Jim. He said 3.
3? Oh, Jesus Christ! It's in world. I'll say 23.
Okay, good answers, but both totally incorrect. It went to 11 pages, and there's a caveat though. When they first broached this subject a week ago, it went to 22 pages. So you were almost ready around that one, and then they shut that one down. Well, they had a new information, and so they posted another in-world story, and so we had to have another dark side page, to which somebody commented, didn't we just do this last week? And this would only last
Deja vu.
I'm sorry.
I predict all of you both are going to be right. Jim said 23. The first one was 22. This one will last at 11. The next one, Eric, will last 3 pages. They're going to like, nope, we're done. We're not talking about this anymore. But the fact that we can't talk about it is, to me, is hilarious.
But because in-world.
I know. Because
I'm sorry, but no, in-world. If you want to go on somewhere like Dragon's Foot,
what am I thinking?
If you want to go in Facebook groups, you can talk about this till you're blue in the face.
I'm expecting nuanced comment. What am I doing? What am I thinking? I didn't even drink tonight, and that's what I came up with. So I don't even know what I'm doing. Because
I mean, at some point, right? At some point, I would like to believe that people are tired of being angry on the internet. And I realize that this is a fool's dream.
Right.
I realize that this is a fool's dream, and that
world peace is right around the corner, Jim, along with
I mean, but I don't contribute to this, right? Like anybody who knows me knows that I'm pretty much a hermit on social media anymore. I never post anymore. Like your best shot is seeing me post pictures of my dogs, or as I had last night, 9 deer in my backyard. So like I shared a picture of that. But for the most part, like being angry about this or that, and don't get me wrong, like we talked about this last week. I'm glad that people see this as marketing opportunities. Right. We talked about shadow stuff, right? Great, right? But it comes back to I don't remember the most successful products in our industry that the foundation that they were built on was pointing at other products and going, neener. Look at what they did wrong. I'm better than they are. Look at that. Like Kelsey never did it. No. Kelsey never did it. Monty Cook never did it. Sorry, go ahead.
But we didn't have a history of our hobby, and now we have a 50-year history, and so you can point back and stuff and say, well, it was done better back, whatever. And this is going to absolutely dovetail with my second take here. But yes, so people are still
bracing.
If I didn't like it, if you didn't like it, take it out. Well, if you don't like it, then put slavery in yourself. Why do I have to put it in myself? Why not just leave it in? Yada yada, back and forth. And so there was something else this week that I noticed a lot of people posted about, and God love Joe Block. I like Joe Block because he's such a curmudgeon. He's the absolute curmudgeon of all curmudgeons, and he's a Greyhawk guy, and he's also a big Star Trek guy. So this week we had Strange New Worlds, the puppet episode, where half the team turns to puppets because of a transporter accident. And I'm going to spoiler here because none of you idiots are going to watch this. It turns out it's a dream anyway, but it's a gimmick of the week episode. It's funny. It's goofy. Is it your father's Star Trek? Not really, but it's there. And Joe Block, God bless his soul, pretty much said, this is the worst thing that's ever been done for Star Trek, including Spock's brain. No, he said it's worse.
Let me get my hat.
He said it's worse than Spock's brain. He said it's worse than children. What about the hippie? Remember the hippie kid? He said it's worse than the hippie episode. Come on,
just get through your point because I'm loading.
I know. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you go. Hold on. But once again, I looked at the comparison. I said, well, this is another venerable something with history, 60 years of history in the case of Star Trek, that the people who like the original don't like the new flavor because it is not taking Star Trek seriously. And I will say in their favor, and I told you guys this before we went on, back when series had 24 episodes, you could have a gimmick. You could have Trouble with Tribbles. You could have a Muds Woman. You could have one goofball episode a season, maybe 2. But nowadays, with the season of Strange New Worlds has 10 episodes. We've already had one goofball gimmick of the week episode. So that's 10% of your episodes are not canon or goofy or silly. And so some people would say there's been more than one, because I understand there was an earlier episode that was also, Jim, we're going to take it down.
Anyway, Eric, I'd like you to share the link I'd like you to just share that below. I'd like that to run for a while.
Yeah. Hold on a second.
So
Keep going, Mike.
I immediately saw the comparisons because I'm in there looking up Dark Sun stuff on World. I'm looking up Star Trek stuff, and it's the same dynamic. It's the same dynamic in both hobbies, is that you're not showing respect for the older stuff. And I'm not going to, I'm honestly not going to disagree with that, because I'm an old person and I like the way things were. That's the way things was. I mean, that's, from Heartbreak Ridge, things get back to the way the evil sergeant. Don't you want things to get back to the way they was? And that's this. Everybody wants their Star Trek.
Please never do that voice.
Their Dark Sun. They don't want the new thing. So that was my comparison this week. Said, what are all the parallels I can find between Dark Sun and Star Trek? And I think it compared pretty well in terms of people who are been fans of a hobby a long time and are used to the original thing being this, and now here's the new thing. And the new thing is not the original thing, and you're not showing respect to the original thing, and you're dumbing this down and blah, on and on. But I find it amusing.
I think you're missing part of it. Okay.
Okay. Because, go ahead.
All right. Star Trek: A Strange New World is the closest New Trek has come to recapturing the original series.
I agree. I saw the first season. I would agree. I haven't seen past the first season, but I saw the first season.
So I think if they pull this in, the first reboot of the Star Trek series,
Discovery, which was
Discovery.
terrible.
Oh my God! If they had done it in Discovery, I don't think people would have batted an eye, because
Discovery was already goofball. Yes,
but no, because nobody that was interested in the original series would have been watching it.
Right.
They wouldn't have cared. People who care about the original series. I'm not watching it this season, but I watched the first season of Strange New Worlds, and I was like, this is the closest thing to legit Star Trek that I've seen in over a decade.
There's Spock. There's the original crew.
But not just that. The characters feel legit to the original feeling. So I think what's happening with the Dark Sun is they're putting it behind, I don't know, mature audiences only, MA, we're going to seal it up and all that stuff. But they're trying to appeal, they're trying to get the nostalgic Dark Sun players excited about it.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like a bait and switch.
They don't know. They don't understand what made the original Dark. If they understand what made the original Dark Sun, that is classic. They're not leaning into it. They're not leaning into it enough. Because classic, I'm going to throw this out there.
It has the face I need to give this point. So
I could be wrong, but why not just make Dark Sun? Throw in all the cannibalism, half dwarf, slave or whatever, and then just tell people you have the option to leave it out. You don't have to have it. Matter of fact,
tap me in.
I like Fugly's comment. Dark Sun, the puppet musical.
That's two great tastes that taste great together. Yes.
So let's start with a weird thing in segue, right? How many of you people remember Forgetting Sarah Marshall?
Great comedy movie. I just saw that.
So Jason, what's his name? Siegelman, I think it is.
Yeah.
He is a puppet aficionado. And if you remember briefly in that movie, they actually referenced the live puppet show version of Dracula, the musical that he did, which, it's about the most airtime that thing ever got, right? It appears briefly at the end of the movie and so on. So I'll start with Dark Sun. I said last week, my theory is that the reason Dark Sun has all the mature label stickers and so on and so forth is that they don't want little Timmy's grandma buying this on the holiday season. Like that's the low-hanging fruit, easy answer. Number two, I'm going to burst some bubbles here and point out that Dark Sun was a moribund, slow-selling game world when it originally was coming out. Like, I'm sorry that people don't want to hear this, and I apologize, but Dark Sun was deep in the remainder piles at most local game stores because It did not land. It and Planescape both. Like both of the last 2 or 3 years worth of Dark Sun and Planescape products hung around at RPG stores forever. And it's why those are not the hardest RPG. You know, if you want to collect Planescape or Dark Sun, those are not the hardest things to find. And so I hear a lot of people who are, this gives them a chance to put on the Dark Sun jacket and rail at WotC, which is fine. I understand that. But I'm just like, you know, I'm not emotionally invested enough to go into the trenches on this,
Right.
because we've talked about Shadow Sun. Somebody mentioned it in the comments. I mentioned it before that person mentioned it in the comments. If you want to see what Chubby Funster's up to, it's gonna be big and it'll be great.
It'll probably scratch your itch if you want to.
That's right. Like, and the other thing is that 13 and 14-year-old kids or 18-year-old kids are not nearly as desirous of slavery and cannibalism as apparently old white guys in their 50s are, which is fine. I don't care. Yeah, but let me talk about Star Trek.
Don't kink shame. Please don't kink shame there.
So let me talk about Star Trek. Like, Star Trek has a long history of 3 or 4 episodes per series being absolute clunkers. Okay, so let's talk about the Next Generation episode where warp travel over 3 or 4 damages the universe and we dare not go that faster, that episode's been ignored by Star Trek ever since it aired. Voyager, let's talk about the Janeway Paris devolved worms love
still the
episode.
Creepiest fucking episode I've ever seen.
Or Tuvix, where they decided they had to mix 2 people into one, and then whatever. And then we can talk about all of Discovery, but Strange New Worlds. I think, and I agree with Eric's take on this, Strange New Worlds has been the closest thing to the original Star Trek that we have seen in 25, 30 years. And I think we all saw Pike on Discovery and we're like, holy shit, I would watch that show. And they were like, holy shit, we ought to give him that show.
Yep.
And for the most part, they've delivered. I think the first couple of seasons, I'm sorry, but those old scientists, the crew, the 2 people from Lower Decks that show up on Strange New Worlds, it's one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever. And if you liked Lower Decks, which is still one of the best, I think it's maybe the second best Star Trek show ever. You should watch Lower Decks, but that episode of Strange New Worlds was picture perfect. And it wove into what was going on the show, but it introduced 2 characters that we've come to know from Lower Decks. There were so many great in-jokes and references that the Star Trek loyalty people, the Trekkies, the Trekkors, as they like to be called, they were all on board. However, what we're seeing is there's only 16 episodes of Strange New Worlds left. There's the ones in this season that have aired, and then it's a 10-episode season. And next year, they're going to knock it out with 6 episodes. They're not going to do a full 10. They're all in the can. They're all done.
All done. Yeah.
And one of the things that they sat down with when they did the writer's room, like Battlestar Galactica did the same thing. They did a big whiteboard, and they put up all these episodes that they wanted to do, that they had to do. And that includes like 36 or 37, whatever it is, where every 37 minutes the fleet has to jump because the Cylons keep finding them. One of the best episodes in the entire first season. Like a spectacular episode of television. And so they sat down and they said, what do we want to do? And one of the things they wanted to do was the crossover episode with Lower Decks. And they even got Jonathan Frakes to direct it. I thought that was great. The musical episode. I'm not a theater kid, but it was at least amusing. Like, there were parts of it, and I get that, you know, one of the things
gimmick of the week, though, Jim. It was a gimmick of the week.
I don't think it was a gimmick of the week. It was a gimmick of the season, right? That there's a gimmick of this season, and I think that's the underlying key to this, because they do the dramatic episodes, but one episode a season is the left turn to Albuquerque. So it was the Lower Decks crossover in season 2. It was the musical episode in season 3. And now we're in season 4 and we get the puppet episode. Now, Mike and I were talking about this before the show. And one of the things that's interesting is they did an episode a couple of weeks ago where the crew goes on vacation. Like they get shore leave and they go to a planet where the atmosphere makes you drunk. And the best laugh of the entire show, and I'm going to spoil it, is Spock is hallucinating Kirk. Like he spends the entire time on the planet hallucinating Kirk, that he thinks Kirk is in the room with him playing board games and playing chess, and they're having deep conversations. And then at the end of the episode, you find out, no, Kirk was actually there and Spock was wrong. And Spock's little brief meltdown over the fact that he's confessed the darkest secrets he has to what he thought was a hallucination, but it's actually Jim Kirk, is the funniest thing ever. But the puppet episode. So, one of my favorite parts about this episode is they got the psychiatrist from Lucifer into green makeup as an Orion pirate, and it works. It really, really works. But it's the gimmick episode. They previewed it a year ago with the shot of the Pike puppet. It's okay. There's two great laughs. There's two really, really great laughs, which is the first time you see them all as puppets, you see the main character as puppets. And so, like, Rebecca Ramjan Stamos is not as hot as they probably could have made the puppet. but the engineer puppet, whatever her name is, that's like 2,000 years old or 3,000 years old or whatever. Oh my God, the laugh out loud moment when you see her puppet, because her hair looks like the flying spaghetti monster with like two weird big eyeballs and so on. I don't resent them doing a screwball episode a season. I don't even resent them for having the humor like they did in the shore leave episode. I think that if you take episodic television as seriously as you're taking your RPGs, then you maybe need to sort of step back and take a breath. Because you know what? If you start writing letters now, you're not going to cancel the show any faster than they're already canceled.
Yeah, Kurtzman's probably out the door after.
That's like there's going to be a complete changeover of all the people managing Star Trek. And really, if this bothered you, what the hell about this awful Section 31 movie that I did not last 15 minutes?
Apparently, that's considered the worst.
It is without a doubt the worst thing with Star Trek's name on it. And it wastes Michelle Yeoh. It undoes all the great character building they did, what little character building they did in Discovery. I watch Star Trek the same way I like to watch Babylon 5, the same way I like to watch interesting science fiction, because if you don't watch it, you don't get more of it. That doesn't mean that I feel like I need to just explode about it. And I don't get angry because they try stuff and it doesn't work, because frankly, we like it when stuff they've never tried before does land. I can't believe how long Glee stayed on the air, but Jesus wept. It went, what, 6, 7, 8 years? And when I first heard the idea of it, I was like, you got to be kidding me. We like innovation in the market space. We like innovation in RPGs. We rave and rave and rave about Shadow Dark, or we rave and rave about this or that. And I think the thing is, we all appreciate when somebody rolls the dice and tries something and it lands and it works. But that also means that we have to put up with bullshit like macho women with guns, right? Briefly valuable, and for the most part consigned to the dustbin of RPG history. Tolus at one point, if you had a copy of Tolus in the original shrink, it was over $1,000 on eBay. They were regularly selling for $1,000 on eBay. Now you can get Tolus and you can download it to your computer for like $25. And whatever, I think a more interesting puppet related thing to talk about is Tim Curry. So Tim Curry passed away yesterday.
Well, before we get to Tim Curry, because I want to spend a lot of time on Tim Curry, I have 3 points to bring up what you just said.
Sure, go for it.
The first of all, I understand why people that, like you said, like we were talking about, if back in the day when you had 24 episodes, 16 episodes, whatever. One of my favorite TV shows of all time is a show called The Prisoner. If you've never seen it, you can watch it in a week or two. 16 episodes long. It's all
Awesome.
self-contained. It's incredible. One of the episodes there is an episode called "The Girl Who Was Death." I know every episode. I've seen them. I have the DVDs. Seen them no time. And what always made me mad about the episode was it's a great episode, but it turns out at the end it's a story he's telling children. It's not, in other words, it didn't really happen. And I just felt cheated because there's only 16 Prisoner episodes, and one of those episodes is not a real episode. It doesn't happen. It's a dream. It's a story, whatever. I always felt disappointed with that because I'm like, well, I like to watch a show every week because The Prisoner was just such an amazing allegory for so many things, and then to have one episode like pull the rug out from under, like, oh, well, it's a dream basically. It's a story. So I understand people's anger at that. You don't have a lot of Star Trek, Strange New Worlds to have that. Number 2, I want to bring up the Angel episode. I don't know if there's any Angel fans here, but Angel season 5, they had a puppet episode. It was really good. And I'll tell you, it was different from this episode because, first of all, it was a supernatural. It had a supernatural reason this happened. There was a demon that's a puppet demon. Now, if you can imagine a creepy puppet, which puppets can be really creepy.
Yeah,
this demon was a creepy puppet, which is really creepy. It's like a clown, but worse to me. At one point, the creepy puppet puts his hand up a human, and the human's dead, and he's making him. It's creepy. Angel gets turned to a puppet, and half the fun of that episode is Angel is such a serious, over-the-top, moody, mournful character, and to see him as a puppet and everybody making fun of him is it's funny. It's actually funny. Also a season with, I think, 20-something episodes. And it led into the next episode. It actually belonged in there. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a whatever. It actually happens. They do some supernatural stuff. He gets turned back to a human. So that I think is a way to do it. I know this sounds insane. That's a way to do a puppet episode the right way. It actually had stakes and meant something. Now, like I said, once again, a horror show, so you can get away with, okay, well, this spell, whatever, turned him into a puppet, and then he had to kill the puppet demon to go back human. So there has been a puppets episode before that was received much better by the fans. The third thing is, we're talking about things that matter, and like I said, Dark Sun, you're right. It was never a big selling. I didn't even really know anybody that played it back when I was playing. Maybe a few guys would play it here or there, but I didn't know anybody running a Dark Sun campaign. But this is what's scary to me about Star Trek. Star Trek, for those who don't know, and everybody here, I don't know if you're your age or older, it was pretty much not well received when it came out. It was, I believe, 3 seasons. The ratings were terrible on it. It got canceled. Just never made much of an impact. It made its impact through reruns. Once it got syndicated,
when it hit syndication,
went nuts in the 70s for it.
And it didn't help that they moved Star Trek on the schedule the same way.
They did all kinds of things to kill that poor show. But the Trekkies remain loyal, like our friend Darlene. They remain loyal and joined fan clubs, whatever. We had a friend come from, my dad had a friend from England that he met at ham radio. Him and his family visited us in the 70s, and all he wanted to talk to me about was Star Trek, because they had just got it syndicated over there. And he was nuts about, this guy was nuts. It's like 1975. I was like 12. And I love Star Trek too. And he's like, oh my gosh, Star Trek. And he went on and on about Star Trek. So it didn't become famous until it got syndicated. And then the movie obviously came out in 1980. And it turned out there was this huge audience for it. And then Next Generation was extremely successful. And so it went on from there. The problem is, the sine wave is, kind of down here, the original, and then the movie came out, and then the movies did really pretty good, and then Next Generation up here, and then it kind of dipped a little. You had your shows, and then Enterprise kind of drove it down a little, and then Discovery, it's like it went down, and it's down there, and then Strange New Worlds kind of took it up a little bit. There's one show that everybody forgets about. There's a show called Picard. There was a show called Picard that lasted 3 seasons, and that was kind of a Paramount thing too, and it was Adventures with Picard, and the only one everybody really talks about is season 3, because it was basically a love letter to the Next Generation. It has all the Next Generation actors on it. They all come back to help Picard. So Paramount, they bought the Star Trek rights, and they showed it subscription only on Paramount, which is a tragedy and a pity, because it has not reached the larger audience because of this. I looked this up just to be sure, because somebody mentioned it on a talk show, and I wanted to be sure. not one single season of Star Trek has charted in the top 10 at Paramount since beginning of Discovery, except one. Guess what season that was? It was Picard season 3. It was the Next Generation logo. That is the only one at the end of the year. You look at all the Picard streaming shows, that was like number 7.
I watched the first season. I skipped the second season, came back for the third,
and it was good. It was probably one of the best treks they've done in 20 years. And every season of Discovery, even Strange New Worlds was, I know it's popular, but none of them at the end of the year have ever charted in the top 10. You talk about, Landman and Yellowstone and whatever else. I mean, I looked at some of the shows there, I've never heard of them, and they were charting ahead of Star Trek. So Star Trek has lost a lot of its luster. It has gone back to the days of the 60s when people didn't really watch it very much. And I think that's a lot of it's Paramount's fault. I also saw that Paramount has not made 1 cent off of Star Trek, because what Star Trek was going to do, it was supposed to drive subscriptions, and those people would come to watch Star Trek and watch other shows too. It's not done that. The amount of people that watch each episode, that they do this by downloads to streaming, and they're able to look on Paramount, is sometimes around 50,000 per episode. That was what the episodes were for the Star Trek Academy. There are YouTubers that put on a red nose and poop on camera on YouTube and get 50,000 subscribers. That is bad.
I've missed my angle. Apparently, I gotta.
Yeah, Eric. You could really up those numbers if you just did some crazy stuff. But I'm serious. That's 50,000 is bad. That's really bad. Now that was also, I couldn't find the numbers for Strange New Worlds or Strange New Worlds, which is apparently a ton more popular than whatever you call it, Star Trek Academy was. With Star Trek Academy, what I saw, it looked like it was trash, dumpster fire trash. So I'm not surprised that's only getting like 50,000 episodes.
Well,
but anyway, to wrap it up so you can continue. I just want to say is, so we're got to the point now where Star Trek is not this big giant, monolithic, everybody loves Star Wars, and you need a good Star Wars movie, Jim. You got to have one. You've got to have another Star Wars movie. You've got to have you've got to either reboot the original cast, or you've got to come up with something that's going to please fans of the franchise.
So the showrunners for Discovery and Strange New Worlds had a vision, which was they do Discovery, spin-off Strange New Worlds. They didn't know what to do with Michelle Yeoh, so they created the terrible Section 31 movie. But by the time they got around to that, already Discovery was at rock bottom, and the ratings were declining. Strange New Worlds was getting better ratings. The other thing to understand that we don't talk about often is that all of these products are made with agreements for other countries, right? So in Canada, all these shows show on Space, which is the cable equivalent of Sci-Fi Channel in the US. So the problem is that very quickly Paramount realizes that the showrunners are just running the property into the ground. And this is why, even though they shot 2 seasons of Academy, they killed it as soon as the feedback started, because it was clear that was it. Like, these guys have got to go. And I always compare this is the moment. So the idea was, in the late 70s, we pick up Star Trek and do a new TV show, and they could never get it ironed out. So then they did the first movie, and the first movie cost a fortune. And even though it made money, it did not bring in the kind of money that they wanted, the kind of profit they wanted. And this is why there's such a fundamental difference between Star Trek, the motion picture, and Wrath of Khan. And Wrath of Khan, we could spend an entire 2 hours talking about what makes Wrath of Khan great.
Really, it's a brilliant movie. It's
a brilliant movie, but more than anything else, the storytelling tightens up. There is an actual story. Let's be sensible about sets. Let's not spend money that we don't have to. And then that sets the stage for every other, like, all the good Star Trek movies are the even numbered ones, and all the odd numbered movies are the terrible ones.
Weirdly, yes. It's crazy.
So, like, they make Star Trek 3 and it's an unmitigated disaster. They make Star Trek 4 and it's a date movie, and you can take everybody to it, right? So on and so forth. This is why Star Trek 5 bombs, and then Star Trek 6, which is the undiscovered country, is a big success, blah, blah, blah. And it ties into, Star Trek 6 ties into, at that point, Next Generation.
Yeah.
So so all of this stuff is why it's hard to get this stuff to work the way you want it to work and do what you want it to do. I think that what we're going to see is just after this motion picture, and they had a couple of movies, then they were like, we should bring Star Trek back into television. And how do we do that? And that's where Next Generation came up. Picard was always supposed to be a love letter to the Next Generation fans because they weren't going to get them to do any more movies. The cast had pretty much told them we're not doing any more movies. And by the way, we're too old to do more movies. So we might do the television show, but we're not going to do any more movies. And the two awful, or not two, but the three reboots, the Kelvin timeline, as people talk about it, they made money, but they didn't add anything to the overall mythos of Star Trek and so on. So I think
they were almost well, they were reboots, definitely, but it was almost like we've already seen this before, but we're going to reshoot it with new people and better CGI and cooler sets. I mean, I enjoyed all three movies.
Most tepid remake of Wrath of Khan you could possibly make.
When you get lens flare, so you're all good.
You got a lot of lens flare, and when you waste Alice, what's her name, in her underwear in the most gratuitous shot in a Star Trek movie, I'm kind of done. I'm out.
Those, you're right. Those made money. They were. I thought they were good. They were adequate. Yeah. But that's all it was. They were just that. That's it. 3 movies. Then we're done. That's it. We're out.
So we have 10 episodes left of Strange New Worlds. I think there's 4 left in this current season. New episode drops tomorrow, and then you got 6 episodes next year, and then it's done. And frankly,
Jim, it's not done. I'm going to have to tell you something, and you might want to grab the whiskey bottle near your seat. There's one more season to burn of Star Trek Academy.
Well, but that's in the can. It's done.
We knew that.
There's one more 10 episode season of Star Trek Academy to burn.
The thing that I'm sad about, is the guy that got to be Kirk is a great Kirk. Mm-hmm. And we won't get him in a post. We won't get him in a show, which I think is talks,
but the person who takes over might want to go a completely different direction.
Sure, absolutely.
Kirk, so
absolutely,
there have been talks that he did so well that they might. You never know.
Yeah, that's what happens. But they're going to have to create a show that, frankly, is going to draw more people into the mythos, right?
Yes.
And this is why I mean. We talked on the show before. I liked Space 1999, but Jesus, I go back and watch Space 1999, and I'm like, how in the world did you capture a 9-year-old's attention? Like I remember watching the show, but it's like Babylon 5. The reason you watch Babylon 5 is it was such a refreshing break from everything else that had been out at that point, and it had this multi-layered story. They were telling an overall story. I get tired of people quoting Mimbari, quoting what's his name, Londo. I'm like, okay, dial it down, Sparky, dial it down. but it's like all this stuff. The folks that are the most enthusiastic about a show are not the target audience. The target audience is a much broader spectrum where you can just watch it, pick it up, and run with it. Blake 7 didn't make it over here the way that it did in England. There were a few PBS stations that had it for a while. And Doctor Who didn't land until the 1980s when they made it.
The production values on that UK stuff is not good for Americans. No. I mean, The Man from Atlantis had better production values than Blake 7.
Oh, let's not talk about it.
And I know the Stewarts would kill me, Mike and Liz, they're Blake 7 fanatics, but I watched that and I was like, did they film this in a backyard somewhere? And
they had great scripts, but the problem is your scripts can only overcome so much bubble wrap. Yeah. And PBS stations in the U.S. are the folks who carried the Doctor Who banner first, and that was in the early '80s when the BBC started to license it out to public television because they didn't think anybody wanted to watch the kids show, and then how wrong they were. So, I think we're going to see a season. I think we're going to see a year or two of nothing new in Star Trek. Nothing new in Star Trek. Yes, they have Star Trek Academy that's in the can that they will eventually put up somewhere. But the negative reaction is so strong. And frankly, after the deal gets done, Paramount is going to have to. I'm going to segue off for a second. Paramount's going to have to come up with Star Trek that markets well and plays well and so on and so forth. But I'll tell you what, the show that you absolutely should be watching on Paramount is Lioness. Oh my God.
Really good.
Lioness is amazing. We're on the third season of a show where when the gut punches come, this is an unflinching look at a reality that people don't want to talk about. And the clandestine services, all the people in the clandestine services love it. The people in the armed forces love it. You may not like what's in Lioness, but Jesus, it's a gut punch.
It's well spoken of on the my police.
It's really good. I haven't seen the latest season, but it's really good.
It's spectacular, and it talks about the unwritten rules of spycraft and so on and so forth. And when somebody shows up at somebody's house this season, that's when stuff gets real, and you realize how many layers and layers and layers and layers of pawns there are between the king and the queen and the guys in the field. Linus is an amazing show. Now, again, like all Taylor Sheridan shows, wherever they can, they film it in Texas on his ranch. So don't believe that.
This isn't the desert. That's Lubbock. Yeah, exactly. You're looking at going, wait a second, that's West Texas.
Like, Lubbock. But I recommend Lioness wholeheartedly. It's a spectacularly well-written show. He's a lot like Perry. He's a lot like the folks that used to make Perry Mason. They have found a stable of actors and actresses, and they are not afraid to use them over and over and over again in all the Taylor Sheridan shows. And I think that's a very smart approach. I think it's a very clever.
But speaking of shows, we're watching Reacher is season 4. I think the episodes they drop on Wednesday, so Christy and I will watch that tonight. All I'm going to say is, do you like big giant Alan Richardson beating the crap out of bad guys? Then you'll enjoy this latest season of Reacher.
You won't be disappointed in what Reacher delivers.
He's going to beat the crap out of a lot of bad guys. He's already been doing it, so it's going to be. I want to bring up real quick a story. You mentioned Doctor Who. I just did a little deep dive on lost episodes of stuff, because over the years, we've talked about this a little bit, because we're kind of like, fanatics about weird stuff, music and comics and TV shows. Well, I was reading this article about lost movies and TV shows that are lost in terms of the tapes are destroyed. They no longer exist. People remember them. They came on. There's proof they existed, but they don't exist anymore. And very famously, people that know, the first few seasons of Doctor Who don't exist anymore because they were taped over by the BBC, who didn't see any value in these shows, and they would just reuse the tapes. And at one point they were missing, I think, 170 episodes. Now they're only missing, I think, 95. They managed to find through private collections. They got guys who had VHS tapes in 1976 and taped these things, and they looked terrible, but they fixed them up. So they have put out the word. If you have one of these episodes, let us know. Well, they're still missing 95 episodes. They're probably gone forever. We'll never see them, whatever. They've disappeared. And they talked about the BBC had a very bad habit of doing that. There's a, there was a big comedian in the early 60s. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he did a show that doesn't exist anymore. His widow, the only episodes that exist of it, his widow has it. And I can't remember the name. He's a very, very famous British comedian, not Benny Hill, another guy. And his widow has some of them, and that's it. They don't exist. BBC taped over all of them. Right. So this led to another story I read, and I've checked it. Apparently, this story is true. Jones, the member of Monty Python, was in a pub in Britain in the mid 60s, and he was a Doctor Who fan. And somebody was mentioning that, by the way, you can't. The first few seasons of Doctor Who don't exist anymore. He's like, why not? Well, they taped over him. He's like, well, I'm glad they haven't done that to the old Monty Python. The guy goes, they're going to next month. I thought that's why I'd like to bring this up to you. And he's like, what? Yeah. Like, yeah, I work at the BBC, and they just tell us to grab tapes off the shelf. And the next shelf is Monty Python. He immediately gets on the phone with all his friends, all the members of the Pythons, everybody, and scrapes up, at the time, a gigantic sum of over $2,000, which at the time was, I don't know what it's worth now, $25,000, $30,000, and bought bought the tapes so they would not be taped over. And that, my friends, is the only reason we have Monty Python to this day. They were going, if he had not had the conversation in the pub with that guy who brought that up to him, they would have taped over Monty Python and we'd hear stories about this amazing show. We probably wouldn't have had Life of Brian, probably wouldn't have had Holy Grail. I mean, wouldn't have had all the, they would have never become big stars in the United States. Eric Idle, Graham Chapman, John Cleese would have had it. So this chance conversation, and the thing that drives people crazy is somebody had mentioned those tapes cost $2 a piece because they used to get. So for the cost of $2 a piece, they have taped. The BBC has taped over history. Kovacs. Kovacs was a comedian I was thinking of in the early 60s.
Doug Kovacs.
Yeah, Kovacs.
No, yeah.
And his stuff, a lot of his stuff doesn't exist because it was taped over. His widow saved what was left. But yes, the BBC was so cheap, they weren't really just spend $2 and change on new tapes. They were just taping over classic British shows. So yes, we have Monty Python, but unfortunately we do not have those 95 episodes of Doctor Who. Now, I don't know who'd want to see those. They're black and white, probably typical early Doctor Who, bad sets, weird things. But it's great. The world would have them. They exist in the world would be awesome.
Right.
And the fact they don't sucks. So anyway, that's just.
I'm gonna say something heretical here.
Here we go.
I look forward to the emails, which is, I think the problem is that Doctor Who was originally intended to be a children's television show, and Doctor Who up through about, I think the problem probably set in around the Tom Baker era, which is that the focus at the BBC of producing a show for kids and preteens, etc., suddenly they realized that all these adults are watching the show and they started focusing more on the adults. And I think that's when Doctor Who sort of went off the rails a little bit. Because when you look at the two Doctor Who movies from the 60s, the Doctor Who versus the Daleks and whatever, I just think that I go back and I watch the Tom Baker episodes because that's, I was introduced to Tom Baker when I think the previous Doctor was Pertwee, when he fell or whatever, and then he transforms into Tom Baker, and now we pick up with Tom Baker, and that whole first season, those first 2 or 3 years of Tom Baker, that's where I got into Doctor Who, and I've gone back and I've seen earlier Pertwee stuff. I watched it up to a certain point, and then eventually I just got to the point where it's like, okay, I got other stuff to read, I got other stuff to watch, I got other stuff
these black and white, really slow episodes.
Right. So my point is that like a lot of successful things that we latch onto, I am the first person to stand up and say Gravity Falls is one of the best television shows made in the last 25 years. But Gravity Falls was made as a kid's show, and Gravity Falls succeeds because it found it grew into a wider audience, but it was originally a kid's show. Rocky and Bullwinkle. We all have fond memories of Rocky and Bullwinkle, but it was a kid's show, damn it. And yes, Jay Ward wrote intelligent scripts,
subtext, a lot of subtext.
But Jay Ward's theory on this was that if you wrote Rocky and Bullwinkle and kids had to ask parents to explain the joke or explain a word, that was better than the kids getting fed the dumbest material ever. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have children like Johnny Quest. My God, I almost have every episode of the only good season, the first season, the only season of Johnny Quest. I have almost every episode memorized. But the dialogue it's a cartoon, but adults latched onto it. And so when we look at a lot of this stuff, I think that's one of the things that we come back to time and time and time again. And I think that PBS was very smart to bring it over. My local PBS station, when they started showing the Tom Baker episodes, because the episodes were short, they were like 15, 20-minute episodes. Yeah. They showed them back to back. Like they showed them back to back to like
PBS. I just posted the chat. PBS had so much to do with Doctor Who succeeding in the United States.
Yes.
Because the Dr. Baker, my brother and I were watching when we lived together in the 80s. We watched the Dr. Baker, Tom Baker, Doctor Who, because that's what PBS was showing at the time. And by the way, I've said this before, I know, but the DFW PBS station was the first American PBS station to show Monty Python.
Really?
And yes, the very first one. They took a chance on it, and it was a huge success, picked up by almost every PBS station in the United States, and of course that led to massive success for the Python group. And but yeah, the first station. So PBS has had a few home runs over the years in terms of bringing over British television and and making something good of it. But yeah, the Doctor Who, that was Tom Baker to me for forever.
Yes. And then he got replaced by the guy from, interestingly, he was replaced by the actor who was on All Creatures Great and Small, which, again, these are just people trying to find a gig to keep ahead of their mortgage. But he had done All Creatures Great and Small. It had wound up, and he was looking for another project. He interviewed for Doctor Who, and he got it when Tom Baker was tired of being on the show.
Peter Davison, by the way, the only Doctor Who actor I've actually ever seen. He was at Tyler Rose Con, the one we went to that I famously reference many times, where Jim Ward was the guest. And they called him the creator of D&D. Peter Davison was a guest at that con. So
wow,
so another legend woven into the Tyler Rose Con was Peter. I walked by and saw Peter Davison at his table signing autographs. But I wasn't that interested enough to get an autograph because I don't think I like.
Who is this guy?
I don't like the Davidson Doctor Who, and he had a tough act to follow.
It takes turns that it doesn't need to take, and you wind up with a show that's
very famously, by the way, Doctor Who. Most people don't remember was off the air for 10 years after Davidson or longer, and then it was rebooted, and the reboots were successful, and then the story took a horrible turn the last 2 or 3 years, which is some of the worst writing that any.
Oh God, they had to go find 6 weird things, and there was the world of the space vampires. It's just, I can't even.
Literally, it's almost like they hired somebody to destroy the franchise. What can you do to destroy this franchise?
And this is why the more modern reboot of Doctor Who. This is one reason why I struggled to get into it, because it was written for adults. And eventually at some point you're like, okay, this makes no sense, right? We can defeat the Daleks because we have stairs. They can't, how are they going to get up the ramp? I got nothing. I think that's where you sort of lose me on some of this stuff, because it's great when you're a kid and you have kid lit and you have kid television shows. And when it takes off and it explodes and adults start watching and adults appreciate it for why kids like it. It's like Phineas and Ferb, right? Phineas and Ferb at one point was the biggest show on cable television because everybody was watching it. All the parents were watching it. And then Disney was spacing episodes 8 weeks apart. New episodes were 8 weeks apart. And it lost momentum, right? And the 2 guys responsible for Phineas and Ferb, their more recent Disney shows have never had the same kind of traction as Phineas and Ferb. But that doesn't mean that I need a Phineas and Ferb live action reboot in 20 years. My kid isn't going to want to see that. Don't do that to us. Just stop.
Well, they need to talk to Disney and tell them to stop live shooting everything they've ever done, because that's the most hit or miss project right now. You're either going to make $1 bazillion or it's going to fail like Snow White did. So just
and mostly it crashes and burns.
Yeah, most of they crash and burn, and they don't make their money back. So it's just stop. Just leave us our memories.
And what's fascinating to me is you have this deep catalog of Disney that nobody's going back to, right? Like, I'm going to say this, and this is going to date me, but the original Mouseketeer show, one of the things that they had was like the Triple R Ranch and whatever the girls' ranch was. I can't remember the name of it, but there's all this material from the 50s and 60s of Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney television shows, and so on and so forth. Like
Spin and Marty, man. Spin and Marty.
How on God's green earth did they miss the chance to remake Johnny Tremaine in time for the 250th anniversary, like, of the country? In 1976, they aired Johnny Tremaine, right? Like, I just don't understand. Like, just, you waste your opportunities one after
Sometimes,
another.
we talk about how badly they, the company that had GI Joe messed up that, anniversary, and now Watsy kind of fumbled the ball for the 50th. Well, we're not. Sometimes these people aren't very good at doing anniversaries, are they? They just
No,
don't
because the
understand
problem
nostalgia.
is that they get trapped in a cycle of they don't want to go all in and have it blow up in their face. And that causes them to hedge their bets and back off and be afraid or be timid in some ways. And to me, we don't. I'm going to segue out of this, right? Which is,
Well, I
in the
got okay.
last
I got the
sorry,
segue when you're ready. Go do it, and I got a segue when you're ready.
in the last 24 hours, we have not been dwelling on Dolly Parton's last 5 years. One of the most interesting things about Dolly Parton's passing has been the just tidal wave of unbelievable Dolly stories. The two that got me last night, where I just had to put the phone down because I couldn't believe what I was reading. One of them was Eminem shared a letter that Dolly sent him, where he had been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and she had appeared on stage and sung that night. I remember this. And after it was over, she sent him a letter that said, first of all, congratulations. I don't understand rap music, but it's very clear that you are a master of it, and I'm glad to see you recognized. You know how these shows are. I wanted to spend some time with you, but I never got a chance, and we got separated, and I'm sorry about that. And then she ends it with, and she keeps calling him Marshall. She keeps calling him Marshall, and she's like, Marshall, you are a great talent, and you're an amazing star, and you have so much more to give. And she ends it in exactly the way you would think Dolly Parton would end one of these. And then the other one that I saw that just like hit me right in the feels was, everybody knows that she has this book club for kids, 20 million books, 20 million books to kids under the age of 5. But when you turn 5, you age out of the program, and your last book comes with a letter from Dolly that essentially says, your time in our club has come to an end, but now I want you to promise me you'll go to the local library and you'll check out more books and you'll keep reading. And again, it's exactly the letter you would think that Dolly Parton would write. And that, like, she has an entire career of these kinds of moments. Porter Wagner famously introduces her, brings her onto the show, screws her over by paying her $30 a week. Then, when she says to him, I have to leave the show, I have to go out on my own, treats her terribly. He hits hard times. To give him some money, Dolly Parton buys his entire catalog from him. And then later, when he scrapes up enough money to try to make an offer to buy it back from her, she simply gives him the entire catalog back. Like this is the stuff that makes the Dolly Parton legend. This is the stuff that this is why she's resonating across every imaginable way you could want to slice the population. That here's somebody who, we're not talking about her most recent achievements, right? Because I will be the first to say the last few times I've seen her live, I've thought you guys need to sort of just pull her back from some of this stuff. But when you look at how she started in the 60s, and you look at what she looked like in the 70s, and making 9 to 5 and opening her up to an even bigger, wider audience, and the fact that she had a sense of humor about the way she looked and how pneumatic her chest was, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a long time before we get another Dolly Parton. It's going to be a long time before we get another.
We had the 1-2 punch, and we just had Tim Curry pass, and I thought what was funny is, good Lord, we spent all night going through Tim Curry's catalog, but I thought, I was thinking, he was in a lot of video games, and so I started looking up stuff. I was like, what video?
Red Alert.
Yes, Command and Conquer, Red Alert.
Yes,
and he
these scientists have come up with this thing. Yes, yes.
And he was also in Gabriel Knight, which I'd forgotten about, but I played that back in '93. But he apparently, I didn't know this, so I'm reading about it. He loved video games, and he, on the set, when he was recording in the 90s and on, he carried a Nintendo Game Boy with him at all times. And he would play it between takes while on the set waiting for his scenes. He loved gaming and loved games. Now, I didn't find anything about him ever playing role-playing games, but he was a avid video game player and he loved doing voice overs for video. He said he did 22 voiceovers for video games. And so let's remember everything Tim Curry did, but also remember Command and Conquer 3.
let's celebrate Tim Curry. When he passed away, when the news broke that he passed away, because he had a stroke, and he did an interview with CBS morning show that aired originally in October, but it actually re-aired a few weeks ago on Sunday morning or Saturday morning. One of the greatest things he ever did, like I tip my proverbial hat to two actors, right? Number one, there's two actors who approached doing a movie with the Muppets in wildly different ways, and both of them nailed it. And the comparison is the Muppet Christmas Story with what's his name, that Get Carter. I'm trying to think of his name.
Oh, Michael Caine?
Michael Caine is in it. And Michael Caine, he treats it like it's his chance at an Oscar. And he is serious. And he is playing Scrooge as hard as anybody has ever Scrooged Scrooge before. And he's chewing up the scenery. And he essentially is acting like the Muppets they're all in London, and they're on the stage, and they're going to get a BAFTA for this. Like he's just all in it. And the contrast is Tim Curry, who, when they cast Tim Curry in Muppet Treasure Island, took one look at it and said, "I'm about to become a Muppet." And he transformed himself into a Muppet for the movie. And this is why when he passed away yesterday, the Jim Henson Company gave him a tribute and said, he's the person that came closest to ever being a Muppet in real life. And I saw a little bit of Treasure Island today, the Muppet Treasure Island. And now tonight, after the show, and after I've got the trash out, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to go on Disney Plus. I'm going to find Muppet Treasure Island, and I'm going to watch it, because the only thing that Tim Curry probably ever did harder than the Rocky Horror Picture Show is Muppet Treasure Island, and I'm gonna give it a watch. I can't wait.
Well, I looked at the games, and I only played Gabriel Knight. I played Command and Conquer, but he was also in a Wing Commander game, which I don't even remember.
Yes,
he was in a Wing Commander game. So yes, he was. He had his
so
fingers
one of the,
in every kind of pie.
So was a former porn star, but we don't talk about that a lot.
But yeah, so remember Tim Curry for all the cool things he did, but also remember he was a video game. He was a gamer like us, except it was video games. But he loved the game.
And if you haven't watched Clue lately, Clue is really wonderful.
That might be one of his best moments.
The last half hour of Clue, where he's manic and running around the mansion and going through all of it, is again just it's too delicious for words. It's just great. Any
movie he was in, he elevated it. He was just anything he was in, because he was not a leading man. He was a bit part guy, but anytime he did a bit part, you were watching it because it was great stuff.
He really, he had a kind of notoriety earlier in his career than a lot of people can manage. And he then had to overcome, frankly, a lot of typecasting because of being in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I was talking with somebody earlier today, and we were talking about Rocky Horror Picture Show, and they were sort of waxing on and on about it. And it has its place. Like, it really has its place in American cinema. Is it the greatest movie ever shot? No. Is it a really interesting little sort of peek at what they managed to get made in the early 70s? Yes. a faithful adaptation of something that can you imagine pitching the Rocky Horror Picture Show to get it made today? Like,
God, no.
no,
Yes.
right? But on a shoestring budget, they managed to bring it to life, and they created something that still continues to this day. But a real reason for that success, a real reason why the movie works, is Tim Curry throwing himself at that role in a way that a lot of other actors would have taken one look at that and said, that would be the end of my career, and I'm not coming near that with a 10-foot pole. And he did pay a price for it, which is why he did so many voiceovers and why he was sort of below the radar. You know, I saw somebody talking about his work in The Hunt for Red October. You know,
Dr. Petrov.
that's right. He wasn't the doctor. He was one of the officers. But he very quickly realized you can meet your mortgage payments on a bunch of these smaller roles.
Oh, hell yes.
And I'm going to do that. And I'm going to
He did a movie, you know, he did at least one movie a year, sometimes two. And it was, you know, I'm looking at his thing here, you know, Hunt for Red October, Home Alone 2, Loaded Weapon, Three Musketeers. I mean, Congo, some of these.
Congo.
I barely remember him in some of these, but he one a year, one every year. He did a movie.
And Congo deserves some special contempt because it wasted the greatest jawline in the world, right? It wasted Bruce Campbell as an actor. And then it has the unbelievably improbable magical space laser. And Congo is one of those 90s movies that you just can't believe it ever got made.
And then, of course, he was Pennywise. He was originally the first Pennywise, and
a horrific Pennywise, like a scary Pennywise.
Out. Yeah, creep people out as Pennywise. Yes, and that was yes, he did. He was in a very memorable arc of Wise Guy, which nobody watches the late '80s undercover cop show, but he did a episode of a guy in the music industry that's just really evil, and he did a great job with that. I'm looking through his TV history here. Yeah, he once again did an episode here or there stuff.
Yes.
And, you know, just he was always working. He just had a job. He always had a job, but not too much. He didn't get great. It's not he was not like you know, Tom Holland or Zendaya. I mean, every time you turn around going, my God, please, no more Zendaya. No more. No, he just, you know, did a movie a year, did a show a year, and he probably cashed a sweet check and did whatever he played his Game Boy.
My God, the great thing somebody shared today was somebody shared a page out of his autobiography where he talks about shooting Muppet Treasure Island, and he references his dalliances with Miss Piggy and how Kermit knew about it, but Kermit was okay with it.
Okay.
And I'm not doing justice to it, but the page out of that is wonderful. Absolutely
great.
Wonderful. You should definitely seek out that.
I bet he's got the autobiography is probably hilarious.
It's funny as hell. I laughed out loud. Like only Tim Curry would essentially decide that in his autobiography he ought to talk about how he was nailing Miss Piggy, and it's okay because Kermit was okay with it as well.
Kermit was okay with it. You know.
Kermit turned a blind eye. Like, okay, great. Things I didn't need to know ever.
Things we didn't want to know.
Yes, very much so. But yeah, whatever. I don't know. So let's see. We're winding down summer. It's coming to the.
All I had was Dark Sun. I have nothing else, guys. I'm whatever you guys got. I had the Dark Sun.
Shot your load.
Dark Sun and puppets on Star Trek. That's it for me.
Wow. So let's talk about something. Ghost in the Shell is celebrating its 30th anniversary. I think they're doing a 4K. They're doing a 4K version of a re-release, which I'm very excited by. That means there'll be a 4K home release, which I'm excited by. But more interestingly is that currently Amazon Prime is showing the new adaptation of the original comic book. And so if you are familiar with Ghost in the Shell, you watch the original movie, then there was a number of home animation OVA releases, standalone complex 2, blah, blah, blah. They really try to expand out on a lot of the little plot threads from the original movie. But one of the problems is that it's drifted away a lot from the original material that eventually was made into the movie. And so the new version that's on that's streaming on Amazon. It's streaming on Amazon as it is airing in Japan, and it is hyper accurate to the point that people who have been who've read the book and so on and so forth, it's clear that, like, I was never a fan of the Watchmen movie, but I have to give Zack Snyder credit because he had a copy of the trade paperback on his lap every time he was shooting a scene, so you can see how he shot panel for panel the original Watchmen movie. The Ghost in the Shell adaptation that's on Amazon now is amazing, and they're covering everything that was in the comic books that got cut out from the movie or got cut out from later adaptations like Standalone Complex, and it's a home run. So if you have an interest in anime, if you have an interest in Ghost in the Shell, if you're not watching this, yes, there is another show on Amazon Prime besides Reacher you should be watching, and it is Ghost in the Shell. And it's a really, really interesting exploration of the original comic book. I'm very, very happy about it. So, like, I'm all on board for this. But that's me and nobody else. So,
nobody's talking about lanterns on.
Oh God, no!
You want to hear?
Awful.
You want to hear the fans bitch about that because that's
listen. Green Lantern was the comic book I came into the hobby with back in, I don't know, back at the DC Explosion. That was the first Green Lantern, Green Arrow.
Well, Eric, you'll be happy to hear that they're doing a deconstructive take on there because they don't do that at all ever nowadays.
Oh no, I know.
And the Lanterns don't wear their costumes.
Oh, Hal Jordan's an asshole.
Why would you want to wear your costumes?
Well, I mean, Jim, this is a deconstruction of the superhero. They don't wear their costumes.
Right, no, he's
beyond that. And then Hal Jordan's an asshole, and he gets killed the first episode. And I mean, come on, this is a deconstruction of Lanterns. They can't just do an effing straight superhero show anymore. It has to be this mind fuck, where I could do this better. And I knew it was going to be. So there was a name attached to this project. Damon Lindelof, the most mid talent in Hollywood history ever. Let's put it this way. He was fired by Kathleen Kennedy. What kind of a mediocre.
What do you have to do to get fired by her?
Get fired by Kathleen Kennedy. He is the most mid of all mids, and he is very famous for. He's one of those guys. Like, there's another director the same way that doesn't think that superheroes are really that great because nobody would really be that heroic. As a matter of fact, I hate superheroes, and I'm here to show you why I hate them. I'm like, why are you doing? No, that's not how we're supposed to do it. So when I saw his name attached to this project, I'm like, I'm done. And then sure enough, I saw the reviews, and I was like, I was right. It's turned into, it's got the girl boss. It's got the weird plot line that doesn't make any sense. It's got no costumes or rings or constructs. They make up constructs, in the comics for the last 60 years or even longer, they're hard light, right? It creates stuff hard light. No, in the TV show, it's sand. They use sand to create the constructs.
In any case, the girl boss is poorly act. I can deal with the girl boss if you have somebody who can actually act. I've only actually, again, my favorite superhero. I've only watched the first episode so far.
Sorry.
I'm dreading watching the second.
I know, Eric. I'm sorry because I read the review and I was just like, you got to be kidding. I got to see it because it sounds so terrible. I've got to see it.
Yeah.
But apparently the girl boss is mad because there's aliens killing people and the two alien policemen coming to town, the Green Lanterns, and she's mad because they're not cops or something. They're like, these guys can, knock off half a alien army with their ring and you don't need their help and you're a small town podunk, come on, man. I'd be like, heck yeah, you guys take over. Aliens in my town, you do this. And apparently it's just terrible. Just terrible. So
I was just kind of confused in the first episode when Hal's interrogating the alien, and the alien's like, oh, well, you probably haven't, your ring is probably low on charge. It's like, well, rings don't get low. They have a 24-hour charge, but they don't get low. They go, no. But not like, oh, you haven't charged your ring in a while. It's like that. And they haven't mentioned anything about the color yellow, so I'm guessing that no longer has an effect.
Don't worry, Eric. It's a deconstruction. They'll probably have a bad guy, probably Sinestro, and he'll be a white guy. He'll be an old white guy. He won't be the alien.
They've already hinted he still looks like
dear God, it's going to be so bad.
Sunburned. very badly.
The comment I had on this, Eric, I saw somebody reviewing it. They said it makes the Ryan Reynolds movie look good, and I was like, "Ooh, whoa,
Ooh,
back it off,
that was camp.
That was bad." And so if that makes it, it's they can't just do a straight superhero movie anymore. Come on, just
I'm gonna have to go back to watching the cartoon series. I never finished that. I gotta go back to that.
As much beaten down as the Superman and Superman movie did last year, I thought it was fine because I thought it was a fun movie. Yes, to me it played like the middle movie of a trilogy because they were talking about the stuff that already happened, and here we are. And I understand what he wanted to do, wanted to get right in the story. And Superman's established, he's doing this and that, but he's already dating Lois Lane and this that. So it was a little confusing, but it was fine. It didn't try to really deconstruct Superman. He was a good guy. He did get beat up a lot, which I thought was counterproductive to the storyline. But then Supergirl came, and unfortunately they based it off Tom King's novel, which is a deconstruction where she's drunk and she's got problems, and dear God, just give us the movie. And I keep reading reviews and seeing the amount of money that DCU is losing. There's a lot of talk that if the next Superman movie that comes out next year doesn't go boffo, that Gunn is done. They're cutting ties and say thanks for the memories, but Superman and Suicide Squad and Creature Commandos and Supergirl, none of them made any money. We're gonna move on. We've got and Clayface coming out next year because everybody was just howling for a Clayface movie, not Batman, but one of his villains, Clayface. What the hell?
Clayface movie. Give me the Dark Knight. Give me the Dark Knight. That's the one I would like to see.
Like give me Batman Year One.
Okay.
Oh God.
Jim okay, wait, hold on. Let's start this. Okay, Jim and Eric. We just got control of the DCU. They want to reboot, and we get to do it. What are the first 3 movies you make?
Eric, you go first.
I would base it on the Dark Knight, personally.
Batman Year One, right? Okay, Batman Year One. Or no, you do okay. You do Batman. You do Batman though. Batman's in there. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. That's the 3 movies you do to start out. Everything branches off from there in the DCU. However you introduce them, you introduce Batman, you introduce Superman, you introduce Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. Then you can do your minor kind of,
then you can do your Justice Leagues, your Avengers.
You just started the Justice League right there.
And you can introduce other characters and then spin them off as opposed to.
But here's what Gunn did. He did Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos, the cartoon, because everybody was clamoring for that. Superman, which is probably the best of the bunch so far.
Right.
A deconstructed Supergirl. And then next year, Superman 2 and Clayface.
Clayface
what is he doing?
They're trying to capture the Joker thing with Clayface. The Joker was a unique...
Very much so.
Great
movie. Yes. Very unique. The Penguin was good too. You might see Penguin. Penguin was awesome. Penguin was really good. And they've already said it's a one and done season. They're not going to bring Penguin back. Penguin was amazing. That was an amazing show to get a chance. But you start out with you do with the MCU. Just look at the MCU. Just do what they do. Don't feel embarrassed that you have to do what the MCU did. Just do what they did. Iron Man, Thor. I mean, you bring Hulk. You bring in your
Captain
main
America,
guys.
You bring
Captain America. And here's our guys, and we're going to team them all up, and they're the Avengers.
And keep them true to their roots, because those are the people that are going to come in and spend their money.
But you get the 3 mainstays. You don't have to have an origin story. I know origin stories are way done, but you can have a year 1 story, which means you don't have to have an origin. You're like, hey, these guys are just starting out. This is what happens, and they all meet each other, and like, hey, let's team up because we're badasses and we can solve problems. But you don't have to have another origin story. We've all seen the origin of that's one thing that Spider-Man did right. They didn't have another. When Tom Holland took over, they didn't have another origin story because we'd already had 2 in the last 20 years. They didn't need another origin story. Same with Superman, same with Batman, same with Wonder Woman. But do a movie, do a year 1 movie, because you're right, Jim. Batman year 1. That's what I would do. He's in Gotham.
I think that if it were me, if you magically gave me the hat, I would like to see them adapt Batman Year One,
Good choice.
where give me a 90-minute, like, let's just make money. Give me a 90-minute movie of 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 Bruce Wayne figuring it all out, where he encounters some of his villains, but it's a 90-minute movie, which means you can show it over and over and over again, and movie theaters would love this. You do a 2-hour version as the director's cut that goes to home video, which gives you a reason to sell the discs. And more importantly, if you really wanted to have a DC television show instead of the god awful Peacemaker one, give me Batman
Peacemaker too. Yeah, I forgot about Peacemaker.
Give me Batman Year One as a 10-episode season, right? Because the way it ends at the end of Year One should be him putting on the bat suit for the first time. Because if you remember, in Year One, he's like in a dark coat with okay.
Yep.
So give me that. Let's talk about Superman, right? Because again, in Jim Kitchen's version of the DC universe, the 90-minute movie of Superman, or 2 hours, I want to see Clark Kent. I mean, the wasted opportunity of having Kevin Costner play his dad and then killing Kevin Costner, like, big mistake. But give me a 90-minute origin story where at the very end of it, Clark has been wrestling with his powers. Clark is stronger and faster and all the rest of it than all these other kids in his little tiny farm town that he goes to school with, and so on. The wonderful thing that worked in the 1979 movie is those quiet little moments, like, Clark has to pick up the bench of football equipment after the asshole knocks it over. But give us the story of why Superman is one of us. And then at the very end of the movie, we have Clark and his dad in the barn, and his dad pulls the trap door and says, he's just like, "Dad, I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand." And then Pa Kent can take him in the basement and say, "Clark, I don't understand either. Your mom and I weren't able to have kids. And then one day, for whatever reason, you fell out of the sky. And I knew right then that you were destined to be something more, something special, something unique. And we have tried more than anything else to raise you in the best way that we possibly could. And now we want to send you out in the world so that you can do good." And that's how Superman comes to be. You're like, if you're not getting chills listening to this, like, I don't understand, right? Because it's the very root of Superman is truth, justice, and the American way. It's why it works. And the American way is Dolly Parton.
Yep.
Right? That Superman is there to help everyone. He's there to make sure the train doesn't fall into the river. He's there to, like, help the kids standing on the edge of a building contemplating suicide. He's that kind of hero. And I think those are the two movies. Now, Mike, I might disagree about Wonder Woman. I think that Wonder Woman, people who really like Wonder Woman love Wonder Woman, but I almost want to say she's like a secondary character. She's not an A-lister. She's like an A- lister. It's like Aquaman. The only reason.
But remember, Jim, when they did the Marvel MCU, Iron Man wasn't really an A-lister for Marvel at the time.
You're right,
because they didn't have rights to X-Men, they didn't have rights to Spider-Man, right. So they kind of had to lead with Iron Man.
They had to lead with, because they had already hawked the catalog. DC doesn't have that problem. DC owns this all.
Yeah.
And I think that you, when you look at what I call the A- team, it's Aquaman, it's all the rest of the League of Superheroes, or the Justice League, right? That really it's Batman and Superman and then the other cool kids. And I would remind everybody that the reason you latch onto these superheroes, right? Like, pick your favorite comic book. Pick the comic book that you read obsessively when you were a kid. I can walk you through my arc. It was Spider-Man, because Peter Parker was the awkward dork that got bit by a spider and suddenly is a hero. And then he has to wrestle with the fact that when he gave into his hubris, he caused the guy to get away, who then kills his Uncle Ben, and he has to live with that for the rest of his fucking life. And Spider-Man grows up real quick. And I went from Spider-Man into Fantastic Four, because the Fantastic Four are this scientifically based, interesting trip through the multiverse and Doctor Doom. I mean, I could spend an entire show talking about why I love Doctor Doom.
Mm-hmm.
But then after Fantastic Four, I latched on to Iron Man. Right. I latched on to Iron Man in a giant way because it was the John Romita Jr. run, and the scripts were tight, and it was really a great
it was
read.
good stuff. Really good stuff.
And then I bumped into X-Men. And then I was on the John Byrne, Terry Austin, Claremont run of X-Men for the longest time. But I think when you look at your own comic books, like, I was not a giant Batman fan as a kid. I knew of Batman. I liked Batman. But I was not a Neil Adams aficionado. I have a lot of respect for the Neil Adams run and a lot of that came along. But I remember Superboy and Crypto and all those terrible Superman books from the 60s and 70s. And they were awful. And they really trivialized the character. The only time I started to get interested in Superman was I started watching the TV show, the old Christopher Reeves TV show, or not Christopher Reeves, but what's his name? And then I saw the movie, and come on, the movie is immediately followed by Superman 2, which is it's an astounding sequel. You know, they shot them at the same time. They were going to make them one movie, a la what they did with Three Musketeers and Four Musketeers. You know, but they split it into two, like what they did with the Salkinds did with Three Musketeers and Four Musketeers. But Superman 2 picks right up and introduces bad guys, and they're bad guys. And I remember the start of that movie where they show up on the moon and they're killing astronauts, and she's putting patches on her prison uniform.
Like, I hate you, Kryptonians.
Yes,
Phantom Zone. You suck.
I like all these Marvel characters we're talking about, but it was Spider-Man, Fantastic Four. Those were the two linchpins at Marvel. Like, I love Walter Simonson and I love Thor, but Thor, Doctor Strange, the Defenders, this was the B list of comic book heroes. Like, X-Men only took off because they decided to revive the book, and after a few years, everybody caught on to John Byrne, Terry Austin, and Claremont. But I don't know. You could do I think the mistake with the Wonder Woman movies that I never understood was that they took her back further than they ever had in the comics.
World War I, which she was not in World War One in the comics.
She was supposed to be World War II.
Yeah.
And why didn't you do World War II? Because
it's weird.
That always struck me as strange. I like Gal Gadot to a point, but she has trouble acting her way out of a paper bag.
She's a terrible actress.
I'm sorry. But she has some charisma as Wonder Woman. But then the sequel, the second movie, Wonder Woman 1984, I mean, we all have Pedro Pascal fatigue. I understand that. But really and truly, that movie was
nobody wants to see supervillains that are all about feelings. They want to see supervillains that are mean and like to punch and blow things up. They don't want to see them that are about bad feelings. Yeah, they don't. That's not.
Yeah. You know, I've got Simonson's run on Thor over my shoulder over here. You know, I have a bunch of these Marvel omnibuses because these are linchpins of modern comic art. Like, really and truly, Walter Simonson's like, hey, I'm going to turn Thor into a frog. And Jim Shooter's like, go for it.
One of the biggest, if you're looking at Marvel and why they succeeded in a lot of stuff, a lot of it was serendipitous, because if you look at some of the greatest creators of Marvel history, they took over failing books. Frank Miller famously took over Daredevil because it was awful. It was bi-monthly. And it had like 15 writers and 15 artists for the 15 books before he took over. He was drawing it, and he said, "I've got some great ideas." And Shooter said, "Fine, whatever. This title's about to be canceled," and he made it a cultural icon. Thor did the same thing. Simon did the thing with Thor. Thor was just kind of limping along. It was always selling, I don't know, back then, a couple 100,000 copies every issue, just the same old. And he said, I've got this idea. It's going to start off with somebody hitting a hammer, and it's going to be called Doom. And you're going to see this Doom. And then it's going to go into the first comic, Thor loses his hammer to this alien. And Shooter's probably like, holy shit, yeah. What? Yes, do that. And he did that, and it was an iconic run. So that is a big part of it. Is they take Iron Man had honestly the run of Iron Man, the first 100 issues are horrible. I have it. I've read it. It's just bad artists, bad writers. It wasn't until you got later on Michelini and Layton took over, and then after that, they did the really famous Demon in a Bottle, where it turns out that yes, Tony Stark's an alcoholic. He's been drinking a lot during the years, and he is an alcoholic.
That John Romita Jr. run, right? That he kills an ambassador. The Iron Man armor fires and kills an ambassador, and as Tony Stark has to turn the armor over and his downward spiral, all by someone's design, he hits rock bottom with Demon in a Bottle and comes to terms with it, and then it's always hanging over him.
And then you get Rhodey, who was Iron Man for a while, which is awesome. Spotlight. So all these things were kind of like moribund, and then these guys come along and they rejuvenate. The same thing happened with Batman, with Neil Adams. Batman, the 60s is horrible. It's a horrible comic. It's just it's based kind of on the TV show, but not quite. It's just goofball. It doesn't make sense. And then Neil Adams goes, "No, this guy looks like a bat, and he's a badass, and he's in the dark. Bad things are going to happen, and this guy's going to beat the shit out of people."
I have to say this. I knew somebody who was a rabid DC collector, right? Just a rabid DC collector, and would pick a book and just go after it like House of Mystery or whatever. And I said, okay, well, let me ask you a question. I said, what about those 1960s DC titles? Because when you look at what Marvel was publishing in the 60s, it starts with Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, right?
Crazy good. Yes.
And I'd say, tell me about the DC side of things. And he goes, I don't collect any of that. It's all garbage.
It's bad.
Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal.
It's just, you know how bad it was, Jim? Jim Shooter got his break writing a comic called Legion of Superheroes. You know how old he was when he started writing that comic? He was like 14.
Yes.
Because they couldn't find anybody else to write it. This 14-year-old guy sent in a script. They liked it. They bought it. Then he said, if you pay me, you're going to have to talk to my mom first. And Mort, whatever's like, your mom, I'm only 14 years old or whatever.
Right.
And so he had to call his mom, and him had to go meet him. And he said, well, I got nothing better going on. I mean, that was the 60s. It was that bad. There's like, yeah, kid, okay, here's Legion of Superheroes. You can do whatever. But yeah, they're terrible. Most of the stuff in the 60s is not good from
DC. It's terrible. It's absolutely awful. And I will level my universal criticism of DC that stands to this day. Like, the local comic book shop manager every once in a while will ask me about a DC title, and I'll say, okay. And he'll be like, yeah, okay. Because my point remains the same, that DC has figured out that you spend money on the artist to do the cover, but that you don't spend money on the guy who does the interior artwork for the most part, which is why the covers look great. The insides are garbage, hot garbage. And this is why I don't buy DC, because if I'm going to spend $4 on a comic book or $5 on a comic book, I want something that looks great. I want something that when I look at it, I'm not like, I got conned into buying this. And I abhor that. I absolutely abhor that.
There's 75 titles. I got to buy every cover for this.
Yeah. Go away. Go deeply away from me, because I got nothing.
Yeah. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I don't think any three of us would sit there and look at the whiteboard, and I don't think the titles we would write on there would be Peacemaker,
nope,
Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos, Superman, Supergirl, and Clayface. I don't think that's going to be
I guess we should get like the Outsiders.
If we walk in the room, all three of us, and we see that on the board, we're going to be like,
I'll tell you why I hated Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the very first episode. I'll give you my secret loathing, which was at no point did you have people in blue jumpsuits with the white holsters in the uniform of S.H.I.E.L.D. that it's been since the 1960s.
Deconstruction, Jim. Deconstruction.
It's all hot garbage. I can give you a better episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. than I mean, my Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show would be a peek behind the curtain every week at a different person at S.H.I.E.L.D. that makes a difference at S.H.I.E.L.D. Like I would have had. I'm not even going to do it. We don't have enough time. Screw it.
We don't have time to rewrite We tried to rewrite the DCU. We don't have time to rewrite the DCU.
It's like GI Combat. GI Combat worked because it was ludicrous that the ghost of General Lee was hanging out with one of his descendants.
Jeb Stewart. Ghost of Jeb Stewart.
That was, oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And oh my God, it's a Jeb Stewart tank. Like that's the first problem. There's no way this would have survived that long.
Tiny little tanks. Yes.
Then it becomes a Sherman. Then they get a Sherman. Okay. But like I was all in on GI Combat. I was all in with the haunted tank. Sergeant Rock. Ty mentioned Sergeant Rock. Holy, like Easy Company would have been such an easy movie to make. You could have done a TV show like Band of Brothers with Easy Company, and I would be all in because it worked. Like Nick Fury, and Marvel, you had Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos, and you had Sergeant Rock with Easy Company. Give me both of these, you morons. And instead we have to deconstruct it and turn it into this lantern. You know what the best part of lanterns has been? Somebody generated an AI picture of a plush woman in a lantern costume, and that picture's been floating around the internet for the last 2 weeks. And that's the best thing to come out of lanterns. That's it. She's not even real. And that's the best thing that's come out of lanterns.
Oddly enough, the theme of tonight's show, even though we verged across everything, has been deconstruction's bad. Just give the fans what they want. Don't deconstruct Dark Sun. Don't deconstruct Star Trek. Don't deconstruct our comic heroes. Just give us what we want because we've got a lot of money. Our generation has buttloads of money we're willing to spend if it's something we enjoy. And I'm sorry, the people that you're trying to make your fans, they don't necessarily have any nostalgia or love for your subject matter. So you don't have a built-in audience already. With us, you have a built-in audience. It's like we talk about all this time, Jim, about the 50th anniversary of G.I. Joe. I would have been so in to buy 50th anniversary stuff of the G.I. Joes that I loved when I was a kid with the fuzzy hair and all the stuff. I mean, I would have spent God knows how much money on that. And instead we got Bupkis. And so I don't know who they were trying to possibly get money out of, but it didn't work. Same with D&D. 50th anniversary, they should have taken a classic, the D series, something, and redone it. And we've talked about this a million times, I know. And just given the old guys something to say that, like a Goodman Games, things I'll have all the Goodman Games on my wall. Why not make one of those for one of the like T1 through 4 or something and do that and say, here is a retro version for our 50th anniversary. People would have gone nuts. We would have all bought copies, blah, blah, blah.
I look forward to the 23-page thread on InWorld in regards to the authenticity of lanterns.
Did it last 23 pages? I'm surprised it went that far until somebody said, that's it. We're done. Because that's how every page ends on InWorld.
This is sort of like somebody dredged up Smallville. All these low budget shot in Vancouver shows.
The Canadian connection.
All the stuff that's filmed in Canada. I just,
with a budget of $25,000 per episode.
All the actors and actresses are eventually just going to appear on the Hallmark Channel or a Netflix made in Canada movie. And
or they're going to be part of a cult and possibly go to prison.
Yes, Nexium. Let's just root for
You know,
Nexium.
so they got a bunch of different or hey, look, Alan Richards, mate. You know, he was on there, and look at him now. He's doing okay. Alan's doing all right. He was who was he on there? He was Arsenal, right? I can't remember who he was.
Well, he was one of them, but and I don't resent people starting off their career in some sort of, you know, come on. Nobody ever talks about Tech War. Nobody ever talks about, you know, Earth Final Conflict. Nobody ever talks about Andromeda for good reason. They're terrible. They're really painful to watch. And a lot of them got made because they were underwritten.
He was Aquaman. I knew he was somebody. I couldn't remember. He was Aquaman.
Aquaman.
In Smallville.
Jesus. On an encouraging note, though, Netflix apparently is getting every season of SCTV and putting it on the air in the next few months, and I can't wait.
Oh, I'm going to look at some of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
Guy Caballero.
Oh my God, there was just some.
Oh, I got some favorite episodes there. I'm going to definitely be looking
John Cougar had an appearance on that one. I still remember that one.
I have all the DVD box sets, but I'm looking forward to the new people being exposed to Bob and Doug and.
Oh, nice.
Yes,
it's going to be old person humor, but if you're interested in seeing how the roots of our comedy came, definitely watch some episodes because there's
cabbage rolls and coffee. Good.
Yes. I have lots of thoughts.
Some great stuff. Yeah, that was just some great stuff back then. We didn't have what all you kids have now with all you cable stations and stuff. We had
to cancel almost all of them at this point.
SCTV came on late night where I was at. It came on like late Saturday night.
Yep.
Might have been PBS. I'm not sure. And so we would always tune in because they didn't always hit it. They're kind of like Saturday Night Live. Every other one hit, right? For every classic there was a bummer.
A dud.
Yeah,
many duds.
But the classics were great. The great ones were just the great ones. So yes, SCTV definitely.
Let's see. I don't know. We're at the post Gen Con sort of lull right now where people don't have enough energy to do too many stupid things. But don't worry, as the fall ramps up, we'll have more stupid things.
ReaperCon is next week, and I will be going for a day probably. I'm going to meet with Ron, Reaper, Gary, and I are not by. He wouldn't let me do that by myself. And I'll probably see Angela Emery and say hi to her. She's always delightful to talk to and hang out with. So we'll make an appearance at ReaperCon, but I'm not going to a con until Game Hole. So I have a month and almost 2 months off, which I badly needed. The con season is tough, man. This year it was a slog. It was hot and miserable outside, and a lot of walking and doing stuff. I'm sure your body was barking at you, Jim, after Gen Con. My God, after all the stuff you had to do there. So yeah, it's been a tough con season, man. It's great that we have so many cons now, though. I'm glad we have so many cons. But God, man, it's getting tough. I remember what I told Doug at our 5th con when we had to buy little motorized scooters for Tim Kask, Frank Menser, and Jim Ward. I took him aside. I said, "We will not become Scooter Con. We are not going to let this happen. All our special guests will not be in scooters." But Jim had just had. I mean, a lot of those guys had just had some issues, and I was like, "This is not a good look. Scooter Con is not a good look." Everybody driving around the scooter.
Peek into the future. It may not be the future you want to see, but it's a peek into the future.
Oh dear.
So here I think I talked about it last week, but I want to talk about it this week. I had a real interesting experience at Gen Con where I did not understand how big Dungeon Crawler Carl was until Gen Con. Mm-hmm. And I would say that 2/3 of the cosplay I saw at Gen Con was Dungeon Crawler Carl. Really? And so, one of the people I worked with at the auction is like, I was like, why is that auctioneer in a pair of boxer shorts with hearts on them and a leather coat? And the other auctioneer I was talking to said, well, he's Carl from Dungeon Crawler Carl. And I'm like, okay, what's that? Like, I had heard about it. And he goes, you don't know? And I was like, I don't. Like, I'm slow to the party. So since Gen Con, I have read 4 of the Dungeon Crawler Carl books, and I can't recommend them highly enough, because I'll tell you what we're at. In 2001, 2000, somewhere in there, as the water was pulling back from the beach and the tidal wave of Harry Potter was about to land, we are at that point with Dungeon Crawler Carl. And Dungeon Crawler Carl is about to be the thing. It is Harry Potter with swearing. I don't want to ruin any of the books, but I'm telling all of you, you need to go read the first book, because you ought to be up on this, because when it lands, right? So Seth MacFarlane has locked in the television rights. There's a movie. The role-playing game is coming from Renegade Studios. Um, the the people who have been following this, it's been percolating and percolating and percolating, and the new books are coming. The last couple of books are coming. The audiobooks are spec flipping tacular. Like, really and truly, I've been reading and listening to the audiobooks, and half the time I just quit reading and I actually listen to the auction. So super strong recommendation for Dungeon Crawler Carl. Kurt's absolutely right. The audiobooks are a home run. I read an interview about I read a thing where the guy who wrote the books, Matt Denneman, Denneman had hours long lines at Gen Con for autographs, like 8 hours long. People lined up forever to get his autograph. But Denneman used to show cats. Like, he used to go across the country to cat shows and showed cats. And somebody said that I think he was highlighted in Cat Fancy magazine or something, and he may be the most successful person to ever show cats in history. Like, the books are just they're all big long reads, tons of characters, all the things that we love about role playing and tropes and so on and so forth. But I'm telling everybody, you need to start reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, because when this starts to hit critical mass in another couple of months, you're going to want to be able to talk to this in a way that, frankly, I wasn't able to talk to. So, yes, if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free in Kindle Unlimited if you're paying for Kindle Unlimited.
Mhm.
But absolutely, the first book, get it, read it, check it out at the library. But guess what? My library has 5 copies of every one of the books, and they cannot keep them in. As there's like a waiting list of 12, 13 people for every single one of the books. But the
Jim, I'm
audio,
going to have to say, much like Harry Potter, who I've never seen a movie of or read a book of, I probably will not visit the Dungeon Crawler Carl universe.
I'm just,
Because I'm
but
a
you know what,
weirdo
Mike?
and
Mike,
too
you would
popular.
love the character.
I know, but I haven't even I've never seen a Harry Potter movie nor read a Harry Potter book. I know he's a boy wizard. That's all I know. And the actress that played his little girlfriend's smoking hot now. That's all really I know. What's her name? Watson, Emily Watson or whatever. She's
Sure.
absolutely smoke show now. That's all I know. That's it.
All right, what do you got music wise this week?
Okay,
Mike?
so I took a deep dive into classics this week, man. Once again, I have continued with my 2-disc volume of Physical Graffiti. This is the special version. I don't know what it's special about, but Physical Graffiti, one of the most overlooked albums of Zeppelin's catalog. And then I followed up with an album that came out when I was a senior in high school, In Through the Outdoor, which if you bought this in the store, the vinyl was wrapped in brown paper because there were like 10 different covers, all of a different, they're in a bar, and it has every cover in here. Every cover is a different view of a guy at a bar burning a piece of paper, which apparently the one close-up shows that it's got a phone number on it. But so it was in a brown paper bag. It was the last album they made. Unfortunately, Bonzo died tragically, and that was the last thing they ever did. And mostly because of Robert Plant. Robert Plant he couldn't see the band going on without Bonzo, so he said, "We're done." And unfortunately, the other guys were like, "Hey, we'd like to still keep making money." Like, well, you could do it on your own, you know. But yeah. So Into the Outdoor, it brings back a lot of memories of high school. It's an interesting album. It's not the direction I would think they were going in the 80s. and we never really found out how they would go in the 80s. But this is a pretty good album. I enjoy it. The other album in this is something called Coda. It is a bunch of outtakes. It's very bluesy. If you know anything about Led Zeppelin, they're very much into the blues, enough to where they stole half their licks from blues songs and old jazz songs. So it's very bluesy. It's a bunch of outtakes. Didn't make it to the album. Most of the time, they were because they were too old school bluesy. So I've got a real big Zeppelin thing going. Once again, In Through the Outdoor, Pete Townshend's solo album, good stuff. And I threw in a top 40 for Jim because I know Jim loves top 40. Pearl Jam's second album, because we don't have enough Pearl Jam in the world. It's got a couple of hits. Daughters on here, Elderly Woman, The Count of a Small Town. I don't remember a lot of it. I thought actually there's not a lot of it they played in the radio except for those two songs. I kind of like it. I did not listen to it a lot when it came out. It kind of just hit the pile. I listened to it a couple of times and tossed it up. But it's a Pearl Jam album that I don't hate even now. I think the songs on it are actually pretty good. So Pearl Jam's a very easy band to hate because they're very, at least to me, they're top 40 and hateable. But the second album's pretty good. I never went into it much when I bought it, but now I'm into it. So those are my 5 albums. You got any movies for us?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tag in on your Pearl Jam album. I was in a record store today when a guy found the first Soundgarden album and just lost his mind. He was so happy. And what I told him and what I would recommend is if you like all that music from the early 90s, the grunge out of Seattle scene, a couple of years ago, they released an expanded version of the Singles soundtrack.
Ooh,
and one of the things
great soundtrack.
One of the things that's really great about Singles is it's a Cameron Crowe movie, and he and Nancy Wilson were married and living in Seattle and going to see all these grunge artists as they were coming up. And this is why Pearl Jam's in Singles. This is why there's so much authenticity about that scene, is because Cameron Crowe and Nancy Wilson were as deeply embedded in that as possible. But the expanded Singles soundtrack is available, and you should really seek it out. It's an amazing version. It goes beyond just what you're used to. It's got some alternate cuts. It's got some of the background music that didn't make it onto the release of the CD when it came out. And I will be the first to say that Chris Cornell's Seasons is one of my most favorite songs of the last 35, 40 years. And the version that's on the single soundtrack is just spectacular. Movie wise, I just want to talk. I was going to talk about 2 movies, and you know what? I just don't have the heart to talk about RoboCop tonight, so I'm going to skip it. But I am going to talk about Skyfall. Skyfall is the Daniel Craig James Bond movie where all these little desperate threads come together before the whole thing shits the bed with Spectre and the movie where he dies. Skyfall gives us this great peek behind why Bond is Bond. He revisits his home. He's against a villain that is not one of the best villains in the Bond series, but he finally just decides to get ahead of the guy by taking all the players off the table. It's one of my favorite of the Daniel Craig Bond movies. I think Casino Royale is a spectacular introduction to Daniel Craig.
One of my 5 favorite Bonds.
But Skyfall really ties it all together, and it sets up the stage for the last couple of movies. I think that by that time we were all very comfortable with Daniel Craig as Bond. He's still trying to get over some of the circumstances of what's happened in the prior movies. I love this little peek into Bond's early history. I just think it's one of the best Bond movies in the entire franchise, and I really, really, really can't say enough good things about it. But Skyfall is my movie pick of the week. If you've not watched it, watch the other Daniel Craig movies beforehand. Casino Royale is an excellent introduction to his version of Bond. We're all waiting to see how Amazon's going to screw up Bond, and I'm afeared for how Amazon is going to screw up Bond.
Well, so I brought this up with Ty and Tom, who are huge Bond fans. And I said, well, you have Dennis Villeneuve is doing the Bond, Dune guys directing it. Stephen Knight's doing the writing, which and he's so I think a good director and a good writer. The problem is we don't know who Bond is, and that's going to be the crux of the matter. Is because
it can't be any worse than Rings of Power, right?
well, so somebody mentioned this, and I think this is absolutely true. There hasn't been a bad Bond yet, like where you're just like, dear God, get him off the screen forever. Everybody that's done it has tried, even Lazenby, who put in a pretty good job for the one movie he did. I don't think there's been a bad Bond, but there's still, it scares you, right? Because they could make the wrong decision. 10 years ago, I would have said Henry Cavill. There's no choice here. Just Henry Cavill. There you go. There's your Bond. Everything he does great. He puts himself into every role he's in. He does it 110%. But I think he's a little old now, and I think you want a younger Bond. You want a 30-year-old Bond. You don't want a 50-year-old actor because they're not going to make it through 3 or 5 movies or whatever. So yeah, that's where I don't look. If they just said Ryan Johnson and Damon Lindelof, I'd have just shot myself in the head right there. Okay, but you're not serious about doing this. But Dennis and Knight, I think they're adequate, if not better than adequate at what they're doing. But it comes down to the actor, man. It's going to come down to who they pick for Bond, and there's so many names out there right now you wouldn't believe it, and they're doing a good job of purposefully obfuscating the field where you don't know who they like, because they'll say like, oh, what about this guy? Oh, we kind of like him. What about this guy over here? Yeah, we like him too. I mean, they're not saying no to anybody. Although I think that they tipped their hand a little bit, is they're not really looking at the older guys, because somebody had said something about Henry Cavill, and I think they said something like, yeah, he would have made a good Bond, and I think he would have too. But he's not going to. I think he's a little too old. So we'll see. I think the best thing is to go with not a complete unknown, but you don't want a big star either. And dear God, it better not be Pedro Pascal, Timothy Chalamet, or any of these guys that are just getting overexposed to the screen. I'll die.
Odds makers say it's Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Aaron Taylor Johnson. I gotta look
Aaron Taylor Johnson. When you see him, you'll know who he is. He's the guy that's on the TV show The Bear, about the cook.
Yeah, he's all right. He's okay. He wouldn't be my first pick, but he wouldn't be the worst pick either. But he's not my first pick. He's done action stuff, you know. Yeah, I know who he is. I'm looking at his picture now. He's okay, but he's not. I don't know if he's dynamic enough to play the part, but I don't know. I was really.
I just wish
that Pierce Brosnan was going to be. Pierce Brosnan had seasons and seasons of his goofball TV show, and I thought that was going to kill
Remington Steele.
But he did an adequate job. His scripts let him down. He had terrible scripts, and Timothy Dalton did a great job with his 2 movies.
I'm going to throw out that what they need to do, like everybody in this discussion tonight, if you have not read the original James Bond novels, if you haven't read Casino Royale, if you haven't read Goldfinger, if you haven't read From Russia with Love, I would implore you to read at least those 3 books. Read From Russia with Love, because From Russia with Love is the great insight into Bond's character. Number one is that Fleming was a name dropper, right? He's drinking. He looks at his Omega while he's drinking a Thackeray, blah blah blah. It's just one name drop after another. But there are moments in those first early James Bond movies that frankly define why we got Sean Connery as James Bond, why Daniel Craig succeeded so well, why Timothy Dalton and some of the others. Yes. And that's a great point. The novels are violent, like really and truly. One of the most interesting discussions is From Russia with Love, where he runs into the agent from Spectre, who is a sociopath, who's escaped from Dartmoor, blah, 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 blah. And the character of Bond has to come back to this and sort of recognize some of himself in the very man he's about to have the fight to the death with. I wish we would get back to that instead of the gadget-ridden cliche Roger Moore era, and some of the other stuff that frankly, a lot of this wankery, I'm glad we put a lot of that behind us with Daniel Craig. We don't need it, and I would prefer we have really. I'd like to see.
I think we're past all the goofball, because that kind of went out with Moore. I mean, Dalton and Bronson were much more serious plot lines and where they acted. But I also, you mentioned Rush with Love. That's one of my favorite movies, because if you read the books and you're a fan of the books, I think those two come. I think Casino Royale and From Rush with Love come closest to kind of showing what Fleming. Because Bond's not a sympathetic character in the books at all.
No.
He's an a-hole, and I think those two movies show him in the light of he's a guy that does bad things. He has to kill people. That's the 007 is. He's going to murder people, and he has the full, the British Empire is 100% kill this guy. And I think those two come across the best in terms of this is who he is. It gets too goofy once you get into more, and it starts getting to these crazy plots, and he's too jokey and goofy, and that's not like Fleming's character at all. Fleming's character was brutal, not necessarily likable, but he's a guy that had to do a nasty job, and he did it.
And I think there is a way. I think this is a much longer debate to have, but I think that the character of Bond is a misogynist. That
very much
one of the things that frequently is thrown up is that he treats women like tissues. Once he's done with them, he throws them away. I think when you read the original novels, what a lot of times is mistaken as misogynistic behavior, in the books, it comes across much more as Bond before all other things, Bond is an agent with an objective that he is trying to accomplish. And literally everybody in his path is just something for information, is something that will get him closer and closer to the objective. And why women loved Bond on screen was that he was this sort of mad, bad, dangerous to know, obviously competent in bed. But when you look at those first few Sean Connery novels, and he's having these liaisons with women, it's never, there's the only one that I can think of in the first three Bond movies that is for pleasure is the Sylvia Trench woman who shows up at the start of Dr. No, and then she reappears in From Russia with Love at the start of it. Like she breaks into his house, or I'm sorry, in the first one she breaks into his house and he tuts her out. The second one they're punting. And he gets the call and he says, I'll be in a half an hour, make that 2 hours, right? Or whatever. And she appears, and I'm going to just talk about this. This is recreational sex. But when you look at all the rest of the movies, when you look at the rest of the characters, particularly in the Connery run, the women he beds, they're objectives. They're things to carry him closer to his objective. And I think that this is an element of spycraft. I talked about Lioness earlier. One of the absolute precepts of Lioness is you do whatever it takes to get closer and closer to your target. And if that means you sleep your way there, you sleep your way there. Sex has always been a part of spycraft and trade work, wet work, et cetera, pardon the pun. But that element of a James Bond, I think people want to say he's just a misogynist, and he is an asshole. Like, don't get me wrong, he's an asshole, but he's also got a job to do, and everything is something to get him along the way. And I would suggest that if you watch those early James Bond movies, think about when you watch the movie, think about who he's sleeping with along the way. Like From Russia with Love, he's banging the crap out of her because he wants a Lecter. Right. It's not that he wants to be with her for the rest of, like, he's going to drop her like a hot potato as soon as the train lands, or as soon as the train comes to a rest.
Yeah,
I know, we're putting Eric to sleep. I've lost.
Well, somebody brought this up too. if you want to read Fleming's original Bond novels, do not read the newer versions because sensitivity readers have changed them.
Yes, they've
find a version before like 2020, because yes, the latest versions that for some reason the Fleming estate has gotten ridiculous in the last 15 years, and they're trying to redo Bond as more sensitive modern man, and they took out all the racial epithets, all the sleeping with women. They basically, the new versions of the book are not worth reading. Find a version from 1990 or 1980 and read that one, because From Russia with Love's great. Dr. No.
Moonraker is not that great. Some of the others.
Do not read The Spy Who Loved Me. It's a terrible book. It was a bunch of short stories that didn't make any sense. It's awful. But other than that, you can't go. They're really interesting. Like I said, if you want to read one, start with From Russia with Love and then Dr. No, and maybe you only live twice. I'm trying to remember some of the books, and those are great. Those are really, really good books. And also Blofield's the bad guy in the first 3 or 4 books, so that's kind of cool. They make him kind of the super villain. So they tried to do it in the movies, but it didn't. It's kind of weird in the movies the way they did Blofield. So
yeah,
Wow.
Donald Pleasance. So that's all we got, folks.
A little bit of overtime today, folks. Yep. I am going to be on Ryan David's Rumble on Friday, Gamers Health on Saturday, and I believe I'm not sure if it's Monday or Tuesday or Sunday or Monday. I'm guesting on yet another live stream. I'll make sure I indicate it on the YouTube chat somewhere. Other than that, thank you to Mike, thank you to Jim, thank you to everybody in the audience. It's been great, and I don't know, man. Thank you.
Gamers Health Saturday.
Gamers Health on Saturday. Yeah, last week we had DM Bloodworth talking about his triple hernia operation.
Oh my God, this is old person talk.
He didn't know he had.
Oh boy.
He didn't know how bad his hernias were until he lost the weight.
Oh dear.
Yes.
I can't wait to find out how bad mine are someday.
There you go. All right, folks. Thank you. God bless.
Later, folks.
Tomorrow.
Night.